Hello, everyone. I'm Mo Markham. I am here with Liberation Hour Radio, 102.7 on FM on Radio Waterloo, and we are on the air every Friday night at 8 p.m. We're also on YouTube and Facebook, and you can find us on Facebook at Liberation Hour Radio. I have a superstar guest today. One of my heroes, Dr. Sailesh Rao, and he joins us here from California today, I think.
Arizona, yeah.
What's that?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Arizona, close. I don't know why I thought California. Anyway, somewhere warmer than here, although it's pretty warm here today too, in Kitchener-Waterloo. So Dr. Sailesh Rao is the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit that is aimed at healing the planet and healing our climate. He is an engineer. He worked on creating the internet years ago. He's the author of 2 books, Carbon Dharma, The Occupation of Butterflies, Carbon Yoga, The Vegan Metamorphosis. And he is one of the executive producers of 4 different documentaries, some of which you will be very familiar with. Cowspiracy, What the Health, and Prayer for Compassion are among them. I think Cowspiracy is very well known and has been shown all over the world. All of them have been, and Prayer for Compassion is his most recent film. He is an amazing activist, a husband, a dad, and a starstruck grandfather of his lovely granddaughter, Kimaya. He is also working on a Pinky Promise tour related to a promise that he made his granddaughter. And we're very happy to have Sailesh with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Sailesh. I appreciate your being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about a whole bunch of different things today, so related to your work, and we will also show some clips during the breaks. I guess maybe the most recent thing, maybe we'll start from the most recent, your tour, which has gone online now, as I understand it. Do you want to tell us a bit about your tour?
Yeah, so the tour is the Pinky Promise tour, which is the promise that I made to my granddaughter in 2016, that the world will be largely vegan by the time she is 16 years old in 2026. And I did a tour about that in India in November. I went to 14 different cities, had 25 different events. We were talking about what we were doing to that promise a reality, keep that promise of mine, because I see it as a promise that my generation made to her generation, that we will clean this up before we leave. Yeah. So I did that tour, and I thought, I should repeat that in North America, because it would be because it's people energized. What I saw in India was that once people realize it can be done, then they wanted to come forward and help. Most people think that, it cannot happen. How can you get the world to be vegan by 2026? It's a dream. And when you show statistics, and I use science, and I say that which the exponential growth in the vegan movement has been happening, makes it almost inevitable that we'll have a largely vegan world by 2026. So that's how fast it's growing.
And I mean, honestly, right now, I hear it all the time as well. You're never going to get people to change. People aren't going to change. We're not going to do it in time. And yet, in the midst of COVID-19, the whole world has changed. Within just a few weeks, things that we never imagined could happen have happened, and changes that we never imagined that we would make, we've made, right? So obviously we can do this. We just need the willpower, we need the understanding, we need the education, and we need our governments on board. And it's clear that our governments can make change, so, you know, so often that's part of it. You're never going to get, people say you're never going to get governments to change, and look what's happened. They've changed because they had to. So we need to, help them to understand that they have to for our future. And I mean, it really is about the kids. It really is about their future. So what kinds of things are you doing on your tour? You're talking to people, you're helping people to understand what's happening. Tell me a bit about.
So the tour now has become a virtual. So I'm talking to different communities and answering questions that they have about what we are trying to do. So different,
you said you're talking to different, I didn't understand.
Communities.
Communities, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now that the tour is virtual, I can actually travel around the world, not necessarily North America. And I have plenty of time as opposed to having to go physically to place. And people are beginning to be more comfortable with this medium of the internet. To talk to people. And so I see it as a way to connect with people, and I want to make them realize, just like we are changing during COVID-19, in how we relate to each other, how we are taking care of each other. This has really brought us together around the world. We see this as a common problem that we all have to deal with together. And we see that we can change. So the emissions, I think greenhouse gas emissions have come down by an estimated 30%. Already.
It's amazing.
Right. And no one would have imagined in our wildest dreams that that could happen in a few weeks, So we did that. So in the same way, I see the vegan movement is something that is essential, that's going to happen. Just like the virus that we have came from a meat market in China. All the previous, 70% of the zoonotic diseases have come from animals. 70% of the new diseases have come from animals.
And from our exploiting animals, yes.
Exactly,
and eating them, yes.
Right. And we also see that, when we eat animal foods, we make us more susceptible to severe implications from the COVID-19 disease.
Right, because of people's health, all of the health issues related to eating animals and animal products. Yes, fair enough. And for me, some of my hope is that what we can take from this as well is an understanding of what animal agriculture is, and what exploiting animals, what eating animals is doing to us and to the planet. There's so many reasons that it's a bad idea, and really no reasons why it's a good idea. One of your films, Cowspiracy, I know your films are mainly focused on helping people to understand the issues, but Cowspiracy is a really powerful tool that I've used. I've screened it in a number of universities, and just looking at the feedback from the students after they watch it and they understand the connection, so many of them are willing to try a plant-based diet after that. Can you tell us a bit about Cowspiracy and your other films, Sailesh?
Yeah, Cowspiracy was done in 2013. It came out in 2014. I wasn't involved when it was being filmed. I found out about it later, and I found out about it when I realized, I saw a clip of it. They were asking for, they were raising funds at that time. I saw a clip of it and I realized it's exactly what I had been trying to get Al Gore to understand. Because I had been on that same kind of quest with Al Gore. I had I had 75 of my colleagues sign a letter to him saying he needs to talk about animal agriculture, take it seriously, and so on. And I had the same stonewalling happen to me. And so when I saw that clip, I contacted Kip and Keegan and I said, I want to get involved in how can I help you? And so that's how I became an executive producer of it. And at that time, we didn't know if it was going to have such a big impact. We also thought that it could backfire on us, that the industry could sue us and all this. But it has had a tremendous, I'm so grateful to the community for embracing it and making it one of the top 2 documentaries for making people go vegan.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, then that's when I realized that film is a medium through which you reach out more people than through books, because I had written my book in 2011 and not many people really read it. Maybe 1,000 copies. Sold 1,000 copies by that time. So, and with Cowspiracy, we were able to reach millions. So I realized this is the modern way of doing education, as opposed to, and the internet also is helping a lot, getting the word out. So then I got involved in more documentaries, What the Health, and then Prayer for Compassion, and now we are doing 2 more, which will come out this year.
That's great.
Yeah. We're doing one called The Land of Ahimsa, which is about India and dairy. And then we are doing one which is with Keegan Kuhn and Alex Lockwood, and which is about animal agriculture and diseases. So which is very relevant to what's happening right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Prayer for Compassion is a film that's aimed at people with religious beliefs, I guess. And it's, I think to help people to understand what really happens to the animals and to think that through. Often we hear when we're doing activism, we hear that, God told us to eat animals, and, that they don't have souls, so it doesn't matter, and all of that kind of thing. And Prayer for Compassion is a really powerful film that helps people to think about that and looks at it from many different religions. Can you tell us a bit about that? Can you talk about the film and what that was about, like what making the film was about for you?
So I got involved with Prayer for Compassion with Thomas Wade Jackson, the producer, and Victoria Moran, the producer, in 2010. They were just started filming it. And the idea there was to look at veganism from a religious angle we could find, and to ask religious leaders in those, what do they think about the treatment of animals? How does their religion want people to treat animals? And what we found is that at its base, all religions are talking about compassion for the animals. So then you could introduce this idea that if you could live without hurting animals, why wouldn't we? Wouldn't we promote to our people? And so during the course of even doing the documentary, a few of the people we interviewed went vegan. Just thinking about it. So in that sense, it's a very powerful movie because it looks at it from all different religious angles. And it also shows how all religions are thinking about the same thing. Compassion for all life is at the foundation of all religions. So that's why I found it, I'm so proud to be involved with that documentary. I'm grateful to have been a part of it.
Yes, honestly, there isn't, I don't think you can make a rational argument, for why it would be okay to treat animals the way we treat them. And the film really goes into that. I think we're going to play a clip from that at the break. When we break, I think we'll play probably the trailer for it so people can see. And one of the things that I do with the SAVE movement is screen films at universities and in the community, et cetera. So if anyone is interested in screening the film, we would be happy to do that. And we usually provide some plant-based foods as well so that people can experience that and help them to think about their choices, about their food choices. I think we will take a short break now, and maybe we can put that film, the trailer up for that right now while we're talking about it. So we will be back after the break. I'm Mo Markham. This is Dr. Sailesh Rao, and he is speaking to us from Arizona. And we're on Liberation Hour Radio. We will be back in a few minutes. Thank you.
How can we expect ourselves to have lives of joy and freedom and spiritual clarity when we are sowing the seeds of the opposite of that?
It's almost like some mad scientist, like Satan himself, designed these systems that are being used now to raise animals. It is absolute insanity.
I don't get how you can love everything Jesus says and then participate in a mechanized system of mass slaughter that involves pain beyond your wildest imagination.
Even keeping quiet and silent about the violence, you are part of that violence.
There's another passage in the Quran that says that because of the wrongs of humanity, there has been much corruption seen in the oceans and on land.
So for a few moments in which we're enjoying what is really just a palate preference, we're taking what is most essential to animals, their very lives. And that's the opposite of compassion, it seems to me.
We are ashamed of our ancestors who owned slaves. We are ashamed of our ancestors who believed in segregation. So too, our grandchildren will be ashamed of what we allowed to happen on our watch. Each of us has to ask ourselves a spiritual question. What side do I want to tell my grandchildren I was on? Was I on the side of mercy and compassion, or was I on the blind side that helped to perpetuate suffering?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine.
So we're just coming back with our guest, Dr. Sailesh Rao, who is speaking to us from Arizona today. And we are Liberation Hour Radio, and I am Mo Markham. Sailesh, I wanted to ask you a little bit too about the white paper that you wrote, and just a little bit about, I guess, making the connection for people. So I will let you explain it. I'm sure you can explain it better than me. But one of the things that we do on the show is try to help people to understand the connection between exploiting animals, animal agriculture, and climate, and all of that, and what it's doing to the planet, and now what it's doing to us in other ways. And we can talk about some more about COVID-19 as well. So I'll let you explain a little bit about the white paper. Thank you so much.
So let me start by telling you how the white paper even came about. I got a call from Jane Wells Mitchell, and she said that she was at a rally by Jane Fonda, in which she had a sign about animal agriculture and people should go vegan to address the climate. And Jane Fonda looked at her and pointed a finger at her and said, stop it. I don't want to hear that anymore. And so Jane was very upset, and she contacted me and she said, can you please explain why you do what you do. Why are you focusing on animal agriculture? Can you just write a paper about that? So I said, okay, I think that's a good idea. So let me gather my thoughts and figure out, tell you, why do I do what I do? So that's how the white paper came about. I started writing down, the technical reasons why Climate Healers is focusing on veganism as the solution to climate change. Okay, so it was basically an internal document for us at Climate Healers. And I had no idea that it was going to just travel around the world. I'm getting emails from Germany, from Italy, people saying, I read your white paper and thank you for doing that. It wasn't meant to be that. It was meant to be like a document that explains why we do what we do. And what we showed there was that if you could get that industry out and instead replaced it with a plant-based alternative, on an annual basis, we will reduce our emissions by 87% from what we have today.
That's amazing. And yes, and I have been part of the climate movement for several years, and it is really frustrating when so many people don't want to talk about animal agriculture and its relationship to climate. But 87% is amazing.
Yeah, part of it, I have to explain where that number came from, because 87% seems like a lot. It says, oh, geez, fossil fuels is just 13%. But that's not what I'm saying. That's not what the white paper says. What the white paper says is that fossil fuels are also a large part of the emissions we are doing. But when we eliminate animal agriculture and replace it with plant-based alternatives, we start sequestering carbon on the land that's currently being used by animal agriculture. That is not being counted today. Okay, so the sequestration, the estimated sequestration, is over 35 gigatons of CO2 per year. Okay? And that comes from a paper that was published in Nature magazine in 2019 by Searchinger et al. So they did what is known as the opportunity cost of eating animals, which is the cost that we are foregoing this carbon sequestration by eating animals. And their estimate was about 5 tons per person per year. Okay? So opportunity cost is a huge component of that 87%. The actual emissions is 31% of the CO2, 37% of the methane, and 65% of the nitrous oxide, okay, which comes from FAO numbers and from Goodland and Annan's analysis. So when you combine all of that, that total emissions comes out to be about 87% of the total emissions we do today, because we are not counting the opportunity cost today.
So I did actually have the opportunity to read through that paper a bit, and I did read the Searchinger paper as well, and I'm not sure I understood it totally, but certainly obviously had some big names behind it as well, and folks from Princeton and Chalmers University, Humboldt University in Germany, and it basically what they're saying, if I understand it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is when we're using the land for animal agriculture or growing food for the animals, so for crops for the animals, we don't have trees on that land or other vegetation that would be sequestering carbon. And so because of that, we are wasting all of this potential that we could have, all of the sequestering that we could be doing of the carbon that's coming from fossil fuels, et cetera. Am I understanding it correctly?
Correct. What happens is 37% of the land area of the planet is used now just to graze our animals. Okay. And now grazing land, we do something for grazing land that reduces its carbon sequestration by orders of magnitude. So what we do is, every year, whatever the cows and the sheep did not eat, we cut them and we burn that. So we do slash and burn on that. So you see these fires that happen every year. So the estimate is that on the 37% of the land area of the planet, we are currently, it's only storing about 2% of the land carbon. The land has more carbon than the atmosphere. It has 3 times as much carbon as the atmosphere. So trees, vegetation, and soil together store 3 times as much carbon as the atmosphere. So on the atmosphere, we have increased the carbon by 30%. That's what's causing climate change. So to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere by 30%, we need to increase the carbon on land by 10%. So then you look at the 37% of the land in which we are just animals, that's only storing 2% of the carbon. And the estimate is if we just raise that 2% to 20%, you can literally reverse climate change. Okay? So that's where this comes from. It's not only is that grazing land storing very little carbon, it is deliberately being cut down every year and made to store very little carbon, because we only want things to grow there that our cows and sheep can eat. We don't want other things to grow, because then they'll crowd out the food that our cows and sheep can eat.
Right. So, so the land is being used it is basically being wasted when we're eating animals, when we're using it to grow animals, and just from a compassion standpoint, and you know, if we think of all of the children, again, you know, it's you know, people tell us, oh, we have an agenda about, you know, veganizing the world, and absolutely we do, and it's about the animals, but it's also about the human animals and our children who are here today, and so many children, you know, so many people dying of starvation or suffering from starvation, so many of them children as well. And I figured it out at one point that more people die of starvation every year than live in the city of Toronto, which is our largest city in Canada. And you know, and the United Nations says most of them are children under 5 years old. So how can we, you know, how can we go forward? How can we say that this is okay? How can we tolerate this? You know, I just can't imagine how we can, the word's not coming to me, how we can legitimize something like this and ignore all of the information that tells us, you know, out of, you know, every major university in the world that's telling us that we can't afford to continue to do this. Oxford University and Harvard University, information from Princeton, from the study that you were talking about earlier. So much information out there. We just need to take it in. We need to help people to understand it. You were talking about deforestation as well, and I understand that there's a video that Kimaya narrates, and I think we will probably show that for our next break. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that video, Sailesh?
Yeah, it's a video that's made as part of the Animal Hero Kids campaign. So these are
Say it
kids.
again. Animal
Hero Kids.
Animal Hero Kids. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so they did it's part of the $1 Million Vegan campaign.
All right.
So it was a campaign that they did. And they filmed it in July of last year. All the kids went to London to get the film done, and they did different segments addressing how animal agriculture is affecting different parts of the environment. And so my granddaughter was one of those kids, and she did the part about deforestation. And basically, this was a campaign to show people that eating animals causes all these problems in human health, problems in environmental health, you know, problems for the animals, the suffering of the animals. So they did a very comprehensive set of videos. And it's basically when kids say that to you, and it comes out as so pure, you know. Yeah, she spoke about food, what the animals eat, and how much we eat, and So you'll see that all those statistics are there in the papers, in technical papers. I mean, what you said is absolutely true. We have an abundance of food on this planet, and yet so many people are dying of starvation. So we actually extract 6 times as much food as we need from the planet, but we feed most of it to our animals. And then the animals give us very little food. There is a 40-to-1 reduction that happens in the food that goes to animals and the food that comes out of animals. So then
Yes.
we have the starvation because there is less food now because we have used up most of the food for feeding our animals.
Right. There's this imbalance, and it's going to only get worse as our population grows, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, the desire for meat is increasing among populations that, countries that are becoming richer and are beginning to copy the Western diet. So
Right.
that's just going to increase. So, and at the same time, it's affecting the planet, as we talked about. And I think the children, I love some of the $1 Million Vegan videos with the kids, and as we've seen in the past year and a half, Greta Thunberg has taken the world by storm. A child coming out and calling us out on what we're doing, and also vegan, because she has looked at whether eating animals and animal products makes sense, and she knows that it doesn't. And so many millions of people following her around the world, and trying to stand up to governments, etc. I would like us to watch the clip of the video, and then we will come back and talk some more. Thank you so much. I'm here with Liberation Hour Radio. I'm Mo Markham. This is Dr. Sailesh Rao, and he is joining us from Arizona. Thanks so much. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Hey adults, are you ready for today's lesson? Come on in, sit down, and get ready to listen up. Today's lesson is on deforestation. Before Europeans settled in America, 46% of our land mass was forest. Since then, we've lost 256 million acres, mostly to agriculture. But why, you might ask, do we need so much land to produce our food? And the answer is because we eat animal products. And animal agriculture is really inefficient. Animal farming uses 83% of our farmland, but it gives us just 18% of our calories and just 37% of our protein. So really, we're just wasting that land. We can get more food from less land if we stopped eating meat and just ate plant-based foods instead. We're not the only ones on this planet. We share it with 8 million other species, but 1 million of them are currently threatened with extinction, mostly because of us. And one key reason they're under threat is because we keep cutting down their homes to clear land for grazing farm animals or to grow crops to feed them. It's crazy! And it's also not very nice. How would you like it if a bulldozer ripped down your home and left you with nowhere to go? Well, wild animals need their homes too. Trees are good for wildlife, for bees, butterflies, bugs, and birds. Trees are good for us because they make oxygen. And what do we need to breathe? Oxygen! And trees are good for the planet. They take carbon from the atmosphere and store it away. If we stop eating animal products, we can reduce the farmland we need by 75%. It can go back to nature, to all the animals who desperately need it. And we should start today.
I'm Mo Markham, and my guest today is Dr. Sailesh Rao. We're with Liberation Hour. We're here today on Liberation Hour Radio, and we just watched a clip that Dr. Rao's granddaughter, Kimaya, was part of with the $1 Million Vegans. Tell us a little bit more about that, the kids the heroes.
Yeah, they are heroes. They have been campaigning for the animals for for a while now. Kimaya has been at it for several years, and she is the one who basically got me to do the Vegan World 2026 project. Right, so she was shocked when she discovered that animals are really her family, that we are so related through evolution. And so when I explained that to her, she was like shocked, and she said, "Why are people eating my family?" You know.
Tell me the story. Tell us the whole story, because I've heard you tell it before, Sailesh, and I like it.
Yeah, the story is, I was going through the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet report of 2016, and it showed that between 1970 and 2012, we had killed 58% of all wild animals, wild vertebrates. And I had earlier, done the calculation that the exponential rate at which we're killing wild vertebrates, we are on track to wipe them all out by 2026. And that was in 2014. I had made that calculation. Because there it had said between 1970 and 2010, we killed 52% of them. So I made my calculations and I thought, my God, why isn't anybody doing anything about this? Maybe my calculations are wrong. So I thought I would wait and see, wait for the next report. And the next report came out in 2016. So that basically confirmed my calculations, because it said from 52%, it went to 58% in just 2 years.
That's
right?
insane, eh?
Yeah, and so I was shocked, and then I was thinking about what to do. And I happened to be reading a book to my granddaughter in bed, to put her to bed. And at the end of the story, she asked me, "Grandpa, who were the first human beings?" So I tried to explain to her about evolution, because I promised her that I would never ever lie to her. So I said, imagine that you're standing on the street and you're holding your mother by your hand, and you ask your mother to bring her mother to stand by her side, and so on. So you create a long line of mothers on this side of the street. And then on the other side of the street, you ask a chimpanzee to do the same thing with her mother and her grandmother, and so on. By the time these two lines, Phoenix to Tucson, which is about 250 kilometers, they would merge, because both lines are going to say, "That's my mother too." She sat up in bed. She said, "What? Are you telling me that animals are my family?" And I said, "Well, now that you put it that way, yeah, they are your family." Because that never occurred to me. I knew how evolution worked. It never occurred to me that she would see that animals are her family right away. And then she started bawling. She said, "Why are people eating my family? Grandpa, make them stop. They're eating my family. Grandpa, make them stop." So here's this 6-year-old girl, crying, bawling her eyes out. And I was trying to figure out how to get her to stop. My job was to put her to sleep, and she's crying. So I told her, "Kimaya, this is what I do. In fact, it's my job to make them stop." So she immediately stopped crying. She looked at me. She said, "This is your job? This is your job? You know you haven't done your job. So when will you do your job?" And I said, "Oh, I have to do it by 2026. Otherwise, we are all in big trouble." So she said, "Will you promise me that?" I said, "Okay, I'll promise you that." She said, "Will you give me a pinky promise?" I said, "Okay, sure, I'll give you a pinky promise." And so we gave a pinky promise, and then she went to sleep. And then she told me, "You can never, ever break a pinky promise." Okay? So the next day, I think she went and talked to her parents and told them, you know what Grandpa promised me? That the whole world will be vegan by 2026. And they said, "What? How? Do you know how hard it is to make people go vegan?" So she comes to me that evening and she says, "Grandpa, I hear that you have a really tough job. So you don't have to do it by 2026. You can do it by the time I'm 17 years old in 2027. So she gave me an extra grace year to do it. But by that time, I decided that it will be called the Vegan World 2026 project, and we are going to shoot for it. Because until we put our intentions down and say we want this to happen, we don't really work for it. So, I mean, We don't think it's going to happen that way. So just like, when President Kennedy said, we are going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, it's sort of focused our minds, to think about how are we going to get a man on the moon and how can we make it happen. So this is why this is what I try to do in the Pinky Promise virtual tour, is to talk to people as to why this is going to happen and why we should have that as our intention. It should be a common intention as vegans, to shoot for a vegan world by 2026. And when we all then work for something common like that, we'll get it done.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Climate Healers is about, is working on that goal, the 2026. And can you tell me some of the different, I know about the tour, are there other things that you're doing with, I know some of that there's think tanks going on and brainstorming and working on that, because I don't show up for them very often, but I know they're out there. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah, so the way we are doing it, we have that intention that the world has to be vegan by 2026. So then we work backwards and see, okay, what should we be doing today to make that intention happen? It's like an engineering project, like any other engineering project. You have to plan for it and you have to map it out and see, what can we do right now to help that happen. And so we have think tanks on different aspects of this transformation. So we see it as changing our story, transforming our story, and then transforming our game. Because the story we tell determines what we think our intention is in this world, right? The story of humans being separate from nature, that makes us think that nature is there for us to use as objects. So we are changing that story. We're transforming that story as humans belonging in nature, that we've always belonged in nature. And in fact, we are the climate regulator species of the planet. So we were responsible for making sure that the Earth did not go back to another ice age. So we kept the temperature constant for the last 10,000 years. And then over the last 200 years, we've raised it by another 1 degree Celsius. But until then, we were the climate regulator species. We acted like that. Right? So transforming that story makes us feel like we have belonged all along in nature. We've been doing something for nature as opposed to something to nature. And then as part of that, we say we now have to become a conscious climate regulator species, because now we have to cool the Earth, because so far we have been heating the Earth. Okay? So now we have to start cooling the Earth, which is a different way of organizing ourselves. So for that, we need to play a different game. See, the game of money that we play right now is a game that's designed for heating the Earth. It's really good at it, because it's about extracting from the Earth. It's about figuring out who gets more, who gets less. It's a very competitive game. So the people who began playing the game earliest, and who played it well earlier, they're dominating in the game. So there are a lot of people who are trying to climb up the ladder, to play this game. So we have created a game of artificial scarcities. So we take something that's naturally abundant, like food, for instance, and we turn that into an artificial scarcity, because in this game, if you have abundance, it has no value. Abundance has no value in the game. I remember going to India a couple of years ago, where farmers were committing suicide. And they were potato farmers committing suicide. And I asked, why are these farmers committing suicide? It's because they had a bumper crop of potatoes. They grew so many potatoes that the price of potatoes plummeted. And so they couldn't then return the loans that they had borrowed from the bank to grow those potatoes. So we have a system, a game, in which abundance leads to zero value. So when we play a game like that, we are going to get scarcity, because that's what we are looking for. That's what we value, right? So we now have to play a different game with different rules in which we value abundance. So we're designing that new game that we should be playing. And that's called the game of Aquarius. So, which can be played in parallel with the current game. So meaning it's a game that you can play it's like, adding multiple currencies to the original currency that allows us to redirect our activities, and do something for the good of the planet and be rewarded for it.
Interestingly, actually, with COVID-19, that's one of the things that's changing. Everything is changing, but money is changing too. And I know certainly it's going to affect a lot of the people kind of at the bottom, but it's also affecting everybody. And one of the things we need to do is get our governments to not bail out these extractive industries like animal agriculture and fossil fuels, in order to, to go back to what we've been doing. What we've been doing for so long just isn't working, and it's not working in our favor, for sure. So that's one of the things that's changing. You were talking earlier about just the pollution levels changing for you as well. Tell me what that looks like.
Yeah, it's outside. It's very clear. I see the sky at night. I see the stars at night that I never saw in Phoenix before. So all the pollution has come down quite a bit. And but what this COVID-19 lockdown is doing is basically putting us in the chrysalis phase of the butterfly. So we've gone from the caterpillar phase to the chrysalis phase.
To the chrysalis, yeah.
And the old ways of doing things where people had to go out and extract in order to make money, those ways are being challenged right now because a lot of people have no more jobs. They have to sit at home and they have no money. So unless we feed them, they are going to go out and do something because they have to eat. So when they go out and do something, they're going to be a danger to the rest of us. So as a community now, we are being called to take care of each other and to change our game, right? So this COVID-19 is making us rethink our game, the game of money. And whatever the government is doing now in bailing out these extractive industries is not sustainable. They may do it once, but the debts are going to keep mounting when they do that. And at some point, the entire monetary system is going to collapse. Just like it did, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where you have to, we have this constant bubble and burst type of scenario. Mm-hmm. And so this time, I think it's almost like it's calling on us to change our game, right? So we now have to create new games in which people can contribute from where they are. They could go and grow food where they are, and they get rewarded for it in this new currency, right? Or they could start cooking at home, or they could start delivering good food to people. See, we have created in the current game, we have seen that our hospital system is being overwhelmed because the old model of making people sick and then fixing them is now not sustainable anymore. We made people sick using this new, with COVID-19, people are getting sick like crazy, and then we don't have enough capacity in our hospitals to deal with that. So now we are better off going and reversing the diabetes and the heart disease that people have so that there are less severe cases coming to the hospital. And we know how to do that. Just giving people good food will do that, right? So all of those things are being prioritized, and that should be prioritized in the new game that we play.
See, it is changing the game on so many levels. It's changing the money game, which absolutely needed to happen. It's changing the pollution game because people aren't going out and creating as much pollution. People aren't jumping on planes because mostly they're not allowed to. People aren't jumping on cruises and creating pollution that way. And I think we're learning that we can do this differently, and that's the big curve, I think, and that we needed to start to learn. And then the other part, and I think it's our job going forward also is to that people are learning and need to learn more that the connection between what we eat and all of these viruses and illnesses, and how we can change that, and how much massive difference that's going to make, like you say, to underlying health issues, to so many things that this industry creates. You know, people think about food poisoning and listeria and all of that and E. coli. They don't make the connection between, you know, eating animals and all of those. They don't make the connection between swine flu and bird flu and all of that happening. And you know, even in the midst of COVID-19, there have been reports of bird flu in several different countries, you know, happening simultaneously. The Philippines, we were talking about this in another show, the Philippines, Germany, India, and China, and I hadn't realized that there were some in India as well, but several places in India it's coming up again too. So for people who want to follow your tour and follow you, Sailesh, how would they do that?
Our website is climatehealers.org.
Climate Healers.
Yeah, and we have so we've started a new one called coronahealers.org. So because I see before we become climate healers, we have to become corona healers, you know,
right?
And that's the process we have to go through.
Yeah.
And so climatehealers.org, there is a pop-up that will come, and people can click on that and sign up to help us with our on the think tank. If they want to be part of the think tank, they can join Vegan World 2026 project. And then the Pinky Promise Tour is an event. So Suzanne King and Ann Mitchell and Ben Cohen are organizing the Pinky Promise Tour. So they will be getting in touch with people around the world about, you know. And if you want to contact me, I'll be happy to put you in touch with them. So my email is srao, S-R-A-O, @climatehealers.org. And so we're basically now trying to create a calendar so people can actually come and sign up for the Pinky Promise Tour on our website.
So they can come in and sign up.
Yeah,
right.
Say, you know, I want to reserve this segment for the Pinky Promise Tour. So this way it becomes an ongoing tour that we could.
Never has to end.
Never has to end. It's
until
one of those,
2026 when we've changed the world,
exactly.
when we've veganized the world. Yeah, right. That will be amazing. Anything else that, any last things that you want to share with us, Sailesh, before we go?
I want to share that I'm really grateful for this community. I'm grateful to be alive at this time in history where we are able to make this transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly. So I think it's a very unique moment in history. And so I want people to feel that you are part of something extraordinary, the greatest transformation in human history that's happening right now. So thank you very much.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I always love how positive you make us think, and that's beautiful. We are in the midst of a transformation. Thank you so much for joining us, Sailesh. My guest is Dr. Sailesh Rao, and from Climate Healers, and we really appreciate him being part of Liberation Hour Radio, and we thank you all. And I think we may have one more clip for you before the end. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we will be with you every Friday night at 8 p.m. Well, at least I will, or one of my colleagues, probably not Sailesh again for a while, but we would love to have you on again sometime, Sailesh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you.
Do you think there should be any concern of us making this documentary?
If you don't realize right now that you're putting your neck on the chopping block, you better take that camera and throw it away.
Let's look at the fundamental problem here.
They're looking to maximize the number of people making contributions.
No one wants to talk about it.
There's suppression and mismanagement of information everywhere it abounds.
It starts at the local level, but then it goes all the way to Congress.
When you consider the devastation it's having on our planet as well as the oceans.
And we're in the middle of the largest mass extinction of species in 65 million years.
They can dictate the federal policies because they have so much political power.
And one of the largest industries on the planet, the biggest environmental impact, trying to keep us in the dark about how it's operating.
That's the one thing no one talks about here. Everybody goes around that.
A lot of people just keep their mouths shut because they don't want to be the next one with the bullet to their head.
I don't know that I would want to comment on that.